Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Azure Takeoff Show. And I hope the last episode which we did was a really exciting one and a really amazing one. What we wanted to do today is continue that session, understand more about what cloud computing is and what are the different types of environments you have, or what you can say. Services you have with cloud computing platform. So I welcome our guest, Tashwar. Hi, Tashwar. How are you?
Hi, Hatim. How are you? So
I
last
am
time,
doing good.
yeah, last
Yes.
time actually, remember how we used the restaurant model to talk about certain things? And then there was one question that you asked me too that triggered me too. You said that so is everything you could use everything you want in the cloud? That means yes, and I answered you yes. But at the same time, it's almost like let's say that I'll use the restaurant analogy again. Let's say you went with your child to the restaurant. Can the child have everything? Probably not, right? So there are
Yes.
certain restrictions that you could put for your child that you cannot eat this, too much sugar, or whatever it is. You could exactly do that kind of stuff in the cloud too. So you, as the owner, have the right to actually control whatever you want, but you could give a lesser privilege to your child, sort of thing. So assuming that, let's say you have a IT people, and then you want to give lesser privileges to maybe developers or maybe some other organization. You actually have control over that too. So it's not like a free meal that anybody could go everywhere to. So I wanted to correct that too.
That's great.
Yeah.
By the way, no matching shirts today.
I know that. Oh well, it's too
Cool.
hot in Dubai, right?
Yes, it's too hot in Dubai right now,
Yeah.
and
No
that's why I
problem.
have a less light as well.
True.
Cool. So let's go and understand. I've heard a lot of acronyms over here, which is IaaS, Paas, and SaaS. What does it actually mean?
Okay, so IaaS, like the letter IaaS, basically stands for Infrastructure as a Service. So, what that really means is actually you are using cloud computing infrastructure, basically. Just think of it as lift and shift. Let's say you have your own data center and you want to use cloud computing, you have virtual machines running, you have databases running on virtual machines, and you want to actually use cloud computing and not continue on your on prem. That's where kind of IaaS basically stands. So you can lift and shift your computer, all of your computer virtual machines and everything else onto the cloud and start using the infrastructure of the cloud, firewalls to anything else that the cloud computing provides you. You could actually do that. So an analogy that I like using for restaurants again, since we like eating, right? It's basically think of it this way: you are renting a space of a restaurant, but you are in control of the cooking and everything else. So this is just a space that you're renting, and if you want to cook pizzas or spaghettis and all that stuff, you could do all of that stuff.
Mhm.
That's all under your control.
So when you said that I, being the restaurant owner or the place owner, I can do everything. I can cook anything. I can do everything with that, right? Does that even mean that so I'm paying the rent of the place only, and I do anything which I want inside? So do I have a commitment, or is it still pay as you go?
So again, it's pay as you go. That's the advantage of it. So it's like you could cook anything that you want in the restaurant using IaaS sort of thing. Let's assume that you could cook your pizza or whatever. And when you turn off the oven, the restaurant doesn't charge you for the oven. Let's put it that way. But the space is all yours. Whenever you're using electricity for the oven to bake the pizza, and then when the pizza is done, you turn it off. Then the amount of money that you have to pay does not it ends there, sort of thing.
So this is one of the benefits. What are the other I think benefits for me to go to the cloud? If I'm having the same infrastructure, I have to manage it locally. Why would I go to the cloud in that case?
So I mean, the one of the main thing is basically there's no capex basically. So capital expenditure, it's all operational expenditure. It's very agile too. You could actually have agility to actually launch machines instantly, basically to actually have it there. And it's a consumption based model. So when you actually are using on prem sort of thing, you have a capital expenditure. So you have to maintain the machines and everything else. But you have to rather than pay as you go, you have to maintain all of those machines. There's also the flexibility sort of thing. You could turn it off and on anytime you want, and the management too. Basically, the management is a shared responsibility, but at the same time, it's like you want the flexibility to scale. So there is
Yes.
a way to automatically elastically scale to another virtual machine, or even vertically scale or horizontally scale your machines that you want to. So let's say that you, like the typical usage is like Black Friday or something like that. You want to actually have more machines, you could instantly say that launch me 5 machines. Or you could actually even launch it by, let's say one machine reaches a certain CPU, launch me another machine automatically. So those are one of the great advantages too. I mean, not to mention that skilling and all that stuff. Lots of people want to work in the cloud sort of thing. So I mean, having that skilling of like people working in cloud and everything, it's always a good things.
That is great. So now I clearly understand what is the difference and what is IaaS. And what about PaaS then?
Okay. PaaS is, let's think, same as IaaS sort of thing. So each layer actually builds on another layer. So it's almost like a cake. So IaaS is the bottom layer, PaaS is the middle layer. So assume that again you're using like you're comfortable with using VMs and everything else, but you know what? You don't want to manage databases, for example. You want actually other people to manage it. So what happens in PaaS is actually the cloud provider provides you with certain services. Let's put it this way: certain services that you could utilize. A service could be a database service. So you might say that, hey, you know what? I have these web applications, but I don't want to manage the database. Can I actually use the cloud provider? So you could still launch your virtual machine, launch your application in there, but connect to the service provided by the cloud to actually use the PaaS application, basically. So that's more like the, now you don't have to patch the database. You don't have to do all of that stuff. It's automatically done for you. If you need to scale, it automatically scales based on your consumption. Feels like there's too much, you could put a threshold to, but it would actually automatically do all that stuff for you. So that's the benefit of PaaS.
So in that, there was a curious question about what if something gets updated and it's not supported by my code? What will happen in that case?
Usually PaaS is they don't. I mean, it is maintained by somebody else, but as you know, Microsoft is quite good at like making sure that it's backward compatible sort of thing. But I mean, if there is a backward compatibility breakage, usually a cloud provider does inform you that they are doing this maintenance or something like that, or even a new version of the service is coming out. They would make sure that you would be notified for it. But so far, I've never actually heard of anybody actually having their code actually break because of a patch or something like that in a cloud provider sort of thing. Usually, what happens I've seen is like it could be the library that you're using to connect to the database that could actually have issues and stuff. So I mean, those are the pros and cons within it too. So at the same time. Now, there's also another cons too. But let's say that you are using a PaaS service of a database, but you are using certain plugins, for example, of a database on-prem. That plugin you most likely won't be able to deploy it onto the cloud. So you won't be able to use, you don't have the control over it. So that plugin won't be there unless you request, unless there's a highly demanded plugin that actually is, then the cloud provider might provide that service for it. But I've seen in cases where certain customers wanted a certain plugin, like an audit plugin or something, that wasn't in the cloud provider, for example.
Cool. So if I understand this correctly, platform as a service is more convenient to us as a developers rather than IaaS.
Convenience, I would say yes, it is a convenience because you don't have to manage it anymore. But I mean, you could do both too. If you are a person as a developer who likes full control, then IaaS is an option. If you don't want to have full control, but you could rely on a service that is highly available, I would say PaaS would be an option for you.
Okay, cool. And another quick example. So I have been doing a lot of pipelines with my existing application on DevOps, right? So
Mhm.
if I am working with pipelines, would a virtual machine be better than using a web app or a platform as a service?
So when you use a platform as a service, let's say that you have to have a lot of stuff that is going to be configured and it's time consuming. A pipeline could be broken anywhere else. I've I've struggled with Jenkins quite a lot. I don't know if you have Jenkins tried out Jenkins and have break things that you don't know why it broke. But like, I mean, I would suggest, let's put it this way, I would suggest that people actually use platform as service where the service is actually quite reliable. For example, the bill pipeline that you were mentioning, I would personally, I would prefer to use a PaaS service because it would take care of everything else. If there's any maintenance or if there's any things that needs to be done for the pipeline, the machine, Jenkins or Azure built or whatever favorable CI/CD pipeline that we might use. Basically, I would strongly suggest that people actually use that. Then you don't have to actually maintain the service that is actually doing that. Because at the end of the day, CI/CD is important, but it's not the end all sort of thing for your product. Let's say that the way that you make money may not be the CI/CD unless you're in CI/CD business.
Mm.
But assuming that you actually build a product that's going to be launched in a web application or something like that, CI/CD is just a process. So you want to eliminate that. That doesn't. That is more like a process that happens, but it's not your main product that you sell, basically.
Got it. Got it. Clear. So if that is if I consider it that way, are there any disadvantages using Pass over
So
IaaS?
So again, as I mentioned, sort of thing, it's more like if you are really ingrained into a, let's say the the build thing that you were talking about, you are using a certain plugin or something like that. You might not actually have access to installing that plugin into that pipeline. Let's put it that way,
Okay.
because it's a third party uh, plugin that you might have or third party thing that you wanted to actually integrate into it. Maybe most likely you might not have the option of integrating that might be critical for your business too, or it may not be too. So there might be other options for you to choose. Rather than choosing product A, you might have an option of choosing product B, sort of thing that the cloud provider already provides.
Clear. Got it. I think I'm getting there. So let's see the third option, which is SaaS. I've
Mhm.
heard a lot about SaaS. I have been hearing a lot of startups which goes builds up using a SaaS as a SaaS product. So what exactly SaaS is? And
Okay.
where if you can give me some live examples because this is the most confusing part for me.
Okay. SaaS stands for software as a service. So basically, you actually, most likely you've used it. Software as a service is Gmail to Office 365 to OneDrive to Google Drive, any of these things that you see as a service, or even Dropbox and all that. Those are called software as a service. Basically, that's the third layer, the top one sort of thing. So what happens is like you don't have to install anything on your computer, most likely use a web browser to actually, most of the time you use a web browser that actually just has an application, and you actually just log in and you do all that stuff. You might create your calendar in there, you might send your emails and all that. That is called a SaaS service. Now there usually is a subscription fee for it, for SaaS service. I know Gmail doesn't have it, but I mean, like, think of it, the Drive, for example. The Drive might have a subscription service where you go over a certain threshold, then they say, hey, do you want to actually go to the next level to actually give you more drive space so you could store your pictures, to your movies, home movies that you make, and all that stuff. You could store it into the cloud. So those are all like SaaS services that you could actually provide. So it sits at the very top layer of things where the infrastructure is still running in the cloud. They might be using the PaaS, all these services, but you as a consumer would not really know that this is a SaaS service that is running on this cloud and using these services.
So my question again is how this is connected to the cloud platform. So if I understood it in another way, OneDrive is a web application for me. Why I can't put it on a platform as a service, and why should I call it as a SaaS, and how does it connect to the cloud?
Okay, so to answer your first, that's a very good question. To answer your first question is like you want to eliminate the maintenance or anything of this service. You want a company behind it that actually provides you all of this service. You might be actually, hey, you know what? I'm in the business of finance. I don't really need to have Excel expertise for building Excel sort of thing, like the program I'm talking about. But you might want to use a service that actually provides you with the Excel solution. How does it work with the PaaS and SaaS sort of thing? Assuming that you are independent service vendor, the software vendor, actually ISVs, independent service software vendor and you want to actually build your own application. Let's say a team, you want to build another OneDrive, or you want to
Yes.
build another Dropbox or something like that. You could actually use all of these services in the cloud and quickly create your idea. You need a database, you could quickly launch it, and then you could build your application on top of the cloud. And then you could start selling your services in the cloud, basically, as an independent ISV, basically.
So if I understand it correctly, I am building a software as a service with the help of IaaS and Paas, correct? But
Correct.
the end user doesn't know it.
Exactly.
Okay, okay, that's really cool. And where does this list? This lists on any app store or anything, or do we just access it as a web for
So
the ISPs?
most of the time is actually, it all depends. Like, it all depends on what you want to do. Like, let's say you have a gaming. If you're gaming, it half lives on the application and it half lives on the cloud. Because for game, you need like basically rendering and all that stuff. But like, you might not need the back end of like calculating who's the leaderboard and all that stuff. That might be living in the cloud. That is still sort of like a software as a service, almost like, but you just don't realize that it's at the back. Or you could be a web sort of thing. You might be using Dropbox, Basecamp, or all these other applications, or Gmail like or Outlook like application, that actually everything at the back is all done for you, sort of thing. So it could be a web application, it could be another lightweight desktop application too these days.
Clear, clear. So if it's that good, what are the disadvantages of using SaaS?
So one of the main disadvantages is like at you get locked in, sort of thing, when you're using a SaaS service. Or an example is like using Gmail. Are you going to move away from Gmail? Most likely not, right? So I mean, you kind of get yourself locked into it. You feel comfortable for it because you know that there's developers and organization behind that SaaS service might actually give you a good service, right? At the end of the day, it's reliable and all that stuff. So one of the main disadvantages of SaaS services, I would say, is like you might feel that you're locked in, and the data that is there could it all depends on where it resides. There could be GDPR rules and all that stuff. So you need to actually make sure that all the data that is contained, it's either there or you could actually extract that data too. So those are the other concerns that you might have.
That's clear. I think I understood clearly of what I'm trying to build. And when I'm trying to build something, I know where exactly I have to go in that case.
Cool.
Uh, this is an amazing information, Tashwar, and I think I'll just summarize to our audience that we learned what we learned today is IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, which is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. We looked at what are the pros and cons for each one of them, and I think it was very useful, Tashwar. Thanks a lot for sharing this knowledge with us.
Thank you, Hatim. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you. And before leaving, I want all our audience to go ahead and join our Azure community. There's a QR code coming up on the screen right now. Just go ahead, scan this QR code, or follow the link below and subscribe to our Azure Developer newsletter. Thanks a lot for joining us today. Have a good day. Thank you, Tashwar. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.